I've always had a soft spot for slasher flicks. One look at my DVD shelf, yes, I have one of those, is a dead giveaway. To the fans of slashers and horror films in general, names like Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Friday the 13th are often the first ones that come to mind. And don't get me wrong, I love those franchises, especially Halloween. Just take a look at my shelf of Michael Myers masks. Damn, I really need to stop being a show-off in this video, sorry about that. But bottom line, I'm a huge fan of the slasher subgenre. And I'm here to tell you that there are more or lesser known slasher flicks that are really good in their own right. Here are 6 underrated slasher flicks that you should watch. Number 6. Intruder. 1989's The Intruder, directed by Scott Spiegel, focuses on an overnight stock crew of a local supermarket. Craig, who is an ex-boyfriend of a cashier named Jennifer, was recently released from prison, and comes and harasses Jennifer in a desperate attempt to get her back. This doesn't go very well, imagine that, and he ends up getting kicked out of the store. The employees are a bit shaken, but more or less continue their nightly routine. As the night goes on, a mysterious killer brutally attacks the employees of the store, scattering their body parts all around. Could it be Jennifer's clearly psychotic ex-boyfriend? Or is there another deranged psychopath lurking in the shadows? This is a by-the-number slasher, but it's well shot, has decent acting and great kill scenes, all the ingredients it needs to be entertaining. Plus, the Raimi brothers are in this movie, come on. I wouldn't say that this movie ranks up there with the classics, but it's definitely worth a viewing. So keep this one in mind next time you're cleaning out the body parts of your coworkers from your fridge, and you want to put something on in the background. Number 5. Valentine. I have a serious question for you ladies out there. Have you ever had that nerdy kid in middle school who had a crush on you, and maybe he passed you a note asking you to a school dance or something, and naturally you turn him down because, he's not your type, and then years later he shows back up in your life and beats your pervy neighbor to death with a hot iron and sends you chocolates filled with live maggots? If the answer is yes, then you can really relate to this movie. Valentine was released in 2001 and was directed by Jamie Blanks. Our story begins in 1988. A junior high school is having a Valentine's Day dance. You never had a Valentine's Day dance at my school, this is some bullshit. An outcast named Jeremy Melton displays a remarkable amount of bravery by asking multiple girls to dance with him. From one nerd to another, good on you, man. I was absolutely terrified to talk to girls at your age. The first 4 girls coldly reject him. And man, I feel your pain. But the 5th girl, Dorothy, shows the poor lad a bit of interest. Because she too is somewhat of an outcast, being constantly made fun of for being slightly overweight. They end up making out under the bleachers when a group of bullies discover them. Dorothy, who is embarrassed, then claims that Jeremy attacked her, to which the group of shitheads then publicly strip and severely beat Jeremy right in front of everyone. And just a side note here, this school has to have the shittiest chaperones ever. 13 years later, the 5 girls, Shelley, Kate, Lily, Paige, and the lying bitch Dorothy are all grown up, and it's almost Valentine's Day. The girls begin to receive obscene cards.
'Tis a well-known fact that beauty is skin deep. Savor the taste, you are what you eat. Well, that's sweet, I think.
It's the strangest Valentine I've ever seen.
They are then stalked and hunted down by a Cupid-masked killer. Could this be Jeremy Melton? Has he come back to exact revenge on those responsible for humiliating him at the school dance so many years ago? If so, then you should be hunting down those assholes who stripped you down and beat the crap out of you. And maybe Dorothy. But the other 4? Why? Because they rejected you? Geez, I guess some guys just really can't handle rejection. This film has a really tacky early 2000s soap opera vibe to it, but that doesn't stop it from being thoroughly entertaining. I would say that this movie doesn't hold the title for the definitive Valentine's Day slasher, but that doesn't mean that you should disregard it entirely. The Cupid mask the killer wears in this film is effectively creepy, and the kill scenes are not the greatest, but they get the job done. I really feel like this movie in particular deserves either a sequel or a remake. Expectations wouldn't be set that high because this isn't exactly a household name like Halloween. I don't know, I just think we could really use a good Valentine's Day slasher flick. Anyways, Valentine's 2001 isn't a classic. It's one of those movies that's unintentionally funny at times, but you should still check it out. So next time you're watching movies on a Saturday night with the decapitated head of your ex-lover, watch My Bloody Valentine, and then watch this movie. Number 4. The Dorm That Dripped Blood. Also known as Pranks or Death Dorm, The Dorm That Dripped Blood is a 1982 slasher directed by Stephen Carpenter and Jeffrey Abrow. Our story takes place on a college campus. A group of students are staying behind during the winter break to help clear out the building for its planned renovations into private apartments. The group frequently sees a strange man hanging out by the dumpsters who's not supposed to be there. We're going to call this guy Red Herring, okay? The maintenance man complains that one of his drills was stolen, but it eventually gets returned to him. There's not really a whole lot I can say about this movie's plot. Obviously, there's a savage killer on campus who picks off the students one by one in a wide range of murder methods. And that's pretty much it. This film was mostly shot on the UCLA campus, in and around the film school building using the university's equipment. I find it really impressive that what was essentially a student film project actually saw a theatrical release. Sadly, like with many slasher films of the time, the MPAA forced the filmmakers to cut a significant amount of the kill scenes to avoid the X rating. Regardless, this is still quintessential 1980s slasher, making it completely enjoyable. So next time you're hanging out watching movies with the decomposing corpses of your old college buddies, pop this one in. Number 3. The Prowler. Also known as Rosemary's Killer, The Prowler was released in the fall of 1981 and was directed by Joseph Zito. The film opens in 1945. A woman named Rosemary is writing a letter to her lover who's a soldier overseas. She explains that she's tired of waiting around for him and decides to end things between them. Kind of a shitty thing to do to a guy who's overseas and can possibly get his head blown off fighting Nazis. So Rosemary moves on, and eventually attends a graduation dance with her new guy, who's a complete dickhead.
My dad's got even more money than he does.
They end up ditching the dance, and find a private place to do what all young couples do in slasher films. Suddenly, a mysterious prowler wearing military fatigues closes in, and impales them both with a pitchfork. 35 years later, another graduation dance is being planned for the first time in Avalon Bay since 1945. The town sheriff is heading out of town for his annual fishing trip, leaving his young deputy to watch over things in his absence. As the night goes on, the same mysterious prowler returns after all these years, and the killings begin again. This slasher is truly an underrated classic. Unlike most of its contemporaries, it doesn't have a cheesy feel to it. It's a very grim movie with a haunting atmosphere. There's also something both terrifying and tragic about having a veteran who fought in the Second World War coming back with severe psychological problems and using his military training to brutally murder people. The production of this film also had the talents of makeup artist Tom Savini, which automatically gives this horror film a few extra brownie points. There's also some really effective comedy in this movie as well.
Anything else for you today?
Yeah, just some deodorant.
No sweat.
Given its story, it makes sense that it was never turned into a series, although I would like to see this movie remade at some point. But if that never happens, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it, because this still works pretty well as a one-off. So next time you decide to wheel out the impaled body of your ex-lover who dumped you for no good reason, and feel like watching a movie, keep this one in mind. Number 2. The Burning. The Burning was released in 1981 and was directed by Tony Maylam. It starts out on one late evening at Camp Blackfoot. A group of campers are planning to pull a prank on the campground's caretaker, Cropsey. They set a skull with a bunch of worms in it and candles in the eye sockets by his bedside, then tap on his window to wake him up. Cropsey freaks out and knocks the skull down, which sets his bed on fire, and instead of jumping out of his bed, he just sits there and screams as it gets scorched by flames. He eventually breaks out of his shack and jumps into a nearby river. He then spends the next 5 years in a hospital recovering from his severe burns. But we learn in a series of narrations that the doctors really couldn't do much to help him. He is then released from the hospital wearing a black coat and hat to hide his deformities. The deformed Cropsey makes his way back to Camp Blackfoot, hell-bent on seeking revenge. This film obviously draws heavy inspiration from Friday the 13th. Miramax films try to capitalize off the slasher craze of the early 1980s. And what we get here is a very well-executed slasher film. We also get an appearance from the one and only Jason Alexander, and it's kinda strange to see him with hair. Like with the Prowler, this film also has the great Tom Savini providing his expert talents on the makeup effects. You can always count on really effective practical effects if this guy is on board. I read a review on IMDb about this film that pretty much sums up my thoughts. The Burning is a poor man's Friday the 13th done right. This film has a lot of effective kill scenes, great chemistry between characters, and a solid story. It definitely has earned its status as a classic slasher film. So the next time you come home from a long night of bludgeoning camp counselors with a pair of garden shears, and maybe just want to sit back and finish off your evening with a good horror film, have a copy of this movie handy. Number 1. Maniac. I can't think of a better film to end this list on than the 1980 classic Maniac, directed by William Lustig. This film focuses on a man named Frank Zito, and that's kind of funny because the director of The Prowler had the same last name. Frank has severe psychological issues from the abuse he endured as a child. He stalks the streets of New York City targeting young women, murders them, and collects their scalps, which he places on a series of mannequins in his apartment. Frank becomes infatuated with a photographer and befriends her. Despite the abuse he went through as a child, he still has an affection for his mother and misses her dearly. This is the main driving force behind why he kills women. However, this photographer changes something within him. It's implied that she reminds him of his mother, so he doesn't try to kill her. At first. Unlike most slasher films, this doesn't follow the perspective of a final girl, but instead makes the killer the main character. Frank doesn't sneak around wearing a mask and pick off victims. Instead, this film gives us a very realistic interpretation of an actual serial killer, giving us a front row seat to the insanity. This isn't the first horror film to take this kind of approach, but Maniac masters it in my opinion. The character of Frank Zito is portrayed brilliantly by actor Joseph Spinell, and despite what the title may imply, Frank doesn't act like a raging, unhinged maniac all of the time. He's extremely well-spoken, charming, and methodical. His inner turmoil is a part of who he is, and he doesn't struggle with it, but rather everything he does revolves around his madness. Once again, this film is aided by the outstanding makeup effects of Tom Savini, who even plays a small role in the movie. This is one of the best slasher films of all time. It doesn't get the same respect as Friday the 13th or Halloween, and that's a shame in my opinion. So the next time you... fuck it. I'm running out of analogies here. Just go watch Maniac, okay? Watch it or else I'll come and find you. I'll find you, and I'll take the skin off your face! So what are some of your favorite slasher movies? Leave your comments down below. Maybe you guys can give me some ideas for a follow-up video to this one. And the next time you see some stranger coming at you with a sharp object, be sure you run your ass off. Because I want you guys to stay alive long enough to see my next video. Haha. Thanks for stopping by and tuning in. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.